with us as well, recent author. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Rich, welcome. How are you?
Good, good, good. Anxious to hear what Dr. Beck has to offer us.
Yeah, so we're excited to have you. We talk, as always, we talk a little bit offline. The audience doesn't hear that part, but just real quick, if you could just intro yourself. I know you're out there in social media a lot, but just for the purpose of this video and any audience that doesn't know who you are, just give a quick intro, and then we'll get into leadership style and some of the things you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, there are definitely a lot of people out there who do not know who I am. So tell a friend. So yeah, absolutely. My name is Dr. Brandon Beck. I am an educator in Westchester County, New York. I'm an elementary, fifth grade, dual language, English, monolingual, bilingual educator, if you can fit all that into a nutshell. But I call myself an educator because I'm also a coach. I'm also a soccer coach, a professional soccer coach. I am an instructor for the United States Soccer Federation. I am also a coach and director of a program that services about 2,500 families in the Westchester County area, creating programs for soccer for ages 4 to 23. It's just been a part of my life forever. I played in college. I played professionally. It was a big part of my journey. And I'm also a college professor at Manhattanville College in New York that I'm super excited about. So that's a bit. I'm sure I'll come out with a little bit more. I do have a book that just came out. I'm sure we're going to talk about it, Unlocking Unlimited Potential. Really excited to chat about that and share that with so many people.
And we love the title too, that Unlocking Unlimited Potential is really catchy and pretty much a motto of my own just throughout life, just anything is possible. And your actions, put your action forward and you'll achieve whatever you like to achieve. Interested in a couple things because we love folks that have sort of this diverse background and leadership in sports. We've had a few people with leadership in sports as well as roles in education, and the parallels are really interesting to me quite often. Rich mentioned this a little bit offline, but can you speak to, if it does, your leadership style overall in the educational space? Because I know even in the classroom, that's leadership too. Teaching and being a teacher. I know for myself, I would coach every possible soccer and t-ball and baseball team that my kids were on, and having the experience as an educator transcended into that space really well. Because you have a better understanding overall and you just understand how to work with kids and that. So does it for you parallel in any way? And how does your leadership in one space affect your teaching or vice versa? Just curious with that.
So, I mean, absolutely. There's two parts to it, right? So my leadership of others, and then there's my leadership, of the other adults. And then there's my leadership of, my students, because I am a teacher as well, who teaches basically 10 and 11-year-old kids all day. And then I go to a soccer field some days and I'll teach, 16 to 17-year-old kids. So I get a lot of experience in my days. But yeah, there's so many parallels in terms of being an educator. And I touch on them a lot in my book. I mean, you just think about like John Wooden's pyramid of success is like, that's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so, that one particular thing right there, I mean, they're so parallel because of, all of those connections and that whole idea. I mean, you just find a little bit different kind of joy on a soccer field when you win a game. And it's a little different when you have a group of guys or a group of players or a group of girls, and you as a group, you win a game and together you earn that, and it meant something. And, your friends are there watching, and it's a little different in the classroom, but you can still create that environment. And I try to create that environment in my setting. But in terms of a leadership role, as terms of leading others, it's different. It's a different kind of environment. I mean, a lot of my employees, a lot of the people that I work with come from overseas. So they come from overseas. They've, kind of like uprooted and moved here. I'm dealing with kids out of college. I'm dealing with people that are, they move around a lot, and that may not necessarily be a full-time gig for some of them, and some of them it's a part-time job. And so you have to we have a really thorough hiring process. And one thing we do a lot is we hire from within. So we have players that play for us when they're 8, 9, 10, all the way up to their 17, 18. They go to college, they come back and they work part-time and they coach for us. And so, finding those people who are committed to that vision, to that passion that you really want. And they're not these fly-by-nights who are just kind of showing up to coach another team. And in order to hold that together, it takes a certain amount of transformational leadership. And I think that that's one thing that I really learned in this process, is trying to do my best to be mindful of how important it is to be able to lift these guys up so that they can really have the keys to their potential and at their disposal.
So that they unlock their unlimited potential, correct?
You know what? It's that aha moment. We all come back to it, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what setting you're in, honestly.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. And it's funny you said you like the title, because I went through a couple of different types of titles at the beginning of this. And I obviously don't talk about this in the book, but the first title of the book was Close Your Door and Teach. And that just kind of came up as a statement that we used a lot in our school. And as I sat and thought about it, I was like, that close your door and teach kind of sounds like, shut up, I know what I'm doing. And that's the furthest from the perception of the book. And so, when that came out, when that happened, I kind of changed it. And I'm a huge Tony Robbins fan. So I'm like, I invest personally in a personal development coach with Tony Robbins. I'm becoming a coach myself. And I also, in addition to that, I also have done like all his audio programs. So he has a book. He says at the end of all of his like audio programs, he says like, live with passion. So the title of the book was going to be Educate with Passion, but it just didn't fit. I had to list like 30 names and unlock. I wanted potential. Potential had to be in there, and you had to unlock it, and it has to be unlimited,
Yeah. I grew up with, what was it? You own the power. You own the power.
Yeah. The power within.
The power within.
The
power within. Yeah. So yeah, I remember having those, the tapes growing up, listening to those. Yeah.
He still calls them tapes, but he sells them on, you can now download it.
Digitally. Yeah. Digitally. Yeah. I was lucky enough to see him at Half Hollow Hills. They had him in for a speaking engagement on Long Island.
Oh, wow.
So I was lucky enough to see him at one point. But yeah, he's pretty inspiring. Rich, I want to turn it over to you in a minute too to ask questions. But I'm curious too, with the unlocking limited potential, right? That could be you inspiring others to unlock unlimited potential. But as far as a leader goes, do you bring people on or pair up or team with those folks that you feel like you have that inherent piece to them, as far as your leadership style goes, as far as that the openness to achieving whatever you want to achieve, the openness to, hey, let's try it and fail if anything and try again, kind of thing. Do you?
Absolutely.
Does it work both ways for you? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I got to go back to the book because, the book is broken into three parts. The first part is building your foundation. It's that, that growth mindset, that social emotional learning. But most importantly, it starts with you. So you can't unlock any unlimited potential. You can't really develop much around you if you don't understand what's going on inside of you. And that's kind of the foundation. But the second part of the book is looking at challenges as an opportunity to grow. So basically, I talk about a lot of stuff in there that I researched personally and did within my dissertation work, but I just kind of tweaked it a little bit. So it was a lot more reader friendly and a lot more visual than reading a dissertation that's 300 pages long, because I broke that down into about 20 total pages. And I talk about being a teacher of language learners, and I talk about how that's the title of the chapter is Language Learners Deserve Better, and how important it is to utilize what English language teachers of L's are doing, and using that to help other people become better, because good teaching for L's is essentially good teaching for all.
That's right. That's so
and
right.
So
special needs as well. Same thing. Yeah.
100%. I even talk about that. It's even in like this pyramid. One of the things that we identified in our work was the connection between special education teachers and English language learners. And then so it's always about looking at that, those challenges and about opportunity for growth. And then the last part of the book is about the last piece of it is, putting it all together. It's believing in you. That's it. And that's where the research comes in. But what I do with the research is all this work, all this reading that I do with Tony Robbins and Jack Canfield and Les Brown and John Maxwell and all those people that are out there that I read. I bring them into the literature, and I bring them and I connect them to, you know, the Maslow, and I connect them to the Deweys and the Gardners. And it just goes to show that, like, the research that's out there for students, for teachers, doesn't have to just come from an education space.
No.
You know,
Right.
And what's going on in corporate world is important to bring into our classrooms. What's going on in, you know, nature, what's going on in the current events. Like, to me, that's just, I try to connect all that stuff with goal setting and character education, and the importance of being able to identify who you are, how important that is, and how far our schools have gotten away from that is what I see.
Yeah, great leadership transcends time and space. It doesn't really matter where you are. A good leader you can put in any spot, whether it's in education or corporate. Rich, I want to give you a chance to comment as well and ask a question.
I'm writing down your point, though, because that's going to go on a bumper sticker. Great leadership goes beyond.
We'll quote
Time and
Brandon
space.
first, and then we'll come back to it.
But
I'm writing it down too.
There's lots of places to go with this. I'm fascinated by your enthusiasm and catalyzed by your enthusiasm as well. You're not the first person who's held John Wooden up as someone to look to in terms of what people have said about leadership.
He is Rich. He is Rich.
I'm
He is the first person that's combined Maslow and Gardner and all these separate sort of leadership styles in one place.
It's in the book.
Yeah,
I wrote it.
Did you write
Last
that?
chapter? I did.
Go ahead, Rich.
I'm thinking about catalytic leadership. You know, that's which is a fancy word for saying turning each other on. And I'm thinking about where that fits into this. You know, a good coach. I said this before we got on air. I said something along the lines of, baseball team, you get up, you hit, you're sitting on the bench waiting to hit, and then you hit against the pitcher, while the 9 other guys stand outside on the field and try to stop you from doing whatever it is you want to do. And then you flip sides. It's side against side. The same with football, and which is where most of my athletic knowledge and expertise would go. When you talk about something like soccer, which I don't know much about, as I told you before, but have begun to appreciate a great deal. And hockey, same thing there, actually. And basketball, it's a different approach to how teams play. And what those people do, the good teams do, with the coach's catalyst, is to empower each other to make the best out of themselves, to unlock that limited potential. And so the question then becomes, how do teachers empower each other as well as empower students to become that, is really what you're driving at.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, you know, if we're talking about that setting, and I think there's a lot of different settings that you know, we can even go into, you know, you even go into businesses and you go into, you know, other places than just the school. But yes, if you're talking about that in the school, that to me is an ideal environment where we feel, you know, empowered to be able to really trust each other. And I think there's a lot of that goes into play, because everybody's got a hand on top of them pushing them down, and everybody has to answer to somebody above them. And it takes some real guts and potential to be able to believe in yourself to the ability where, hey, I know there's all this senseless noise out there, and I'm going to hold it back, and I'm going to just believe in my people. And it's impossible to say you're going to have 100% people that believe in exactly 100% everything you say.
Right.
So, I mean, I get that. And I mean, it's just a matter of being able to understand each individual's needs. And I think that's important as a teacher too. And I think that's important as a coach. And, you know, I think that's important as a leader in any way. And I think there is no roadmap, there is no script, you know, but it's there to guide you. But you have to be able to include who you are. And in order to include who you are, you need to know the stories of the people around you. And if you don't know the stories of the people around you, and they don't know your story, then we got to start there first, I think.
Yeah, working out of silos. Then, you know, this is just an observation. I've always kind of thought I should do some research on it, but I haven't. And when you mentioned bilingual, we could do a whole time with you just talking about your bilingual role. I'm really interested in that. When you talk about the future of education as such, and the demographics of the children who are mostly coming to our schools, and how how well we handle those kinds of challenges, that's a whole conversation all by itself. But one thing I did know is I go way back before either of you were born when gifted education was the buzzword for about maybe 5 years before it petered out for numbers of very valid reasons. But if you became a teacher of the gifted, you were not the ordinary teacher. Remember, teachers usually are just teachers. There's no a whole that much differentiation except perhaps for their content. You have special education teachers. Now you have L teachers too. And I've always found that teachers who have, like L teachers, particularly L teachers and special ed, maybe even more than gifted, recognize they have a kind of fraternity, and that, as you said earlier, that they need to pay attention to the newest innovations in order to be effective, because their goal is not to glorify themselves, but their goal is to make it right by the kids whom they have. And so they're sharing things with sometimes the teachers who have the G on their chest for general don't necessarily feel that need. So it's kind of, I'm wondering whether that was the reason, part of where you came from in terms of even looking at your own research.
Absolutely. I mean, the biggest thing of that is that when we talk about English language learners, we're only talking about the kids that have been identified by the state. And in New York State, that's only like 11%. And if you go into my school where I teach, I have teaching almost a 60% Hispanic Latino, demographic. And I can assuredly tell you, and one of the questions I asked in my research to every teacher that I spoke to in my qualitative study was, how many kids in your classroom go home to families where the main language at home is something other than English? And in every class, it was beyond 50%. But only we're seeing 11% on the numbers of the number of L's in our schools. So really, I have, in my class right now, I probably have like 16 kids. And out of those, 2 of them are identified by the state as L's. But all the other kids are L's too. Right. So that's the thing, that it's just, if you start labeling students as L's and ENLs or ESLs or whatever verbiage we're using in 2020, 21, I mean, where does that leave us? It leaves us with students that are, that actually believe it. Like, I work with educators and I am a college professor. I'm a monolingual college professor that gives certificates for TESOL. And I don't even have the certificate myself. And I say that because it just goes to show that you don't have to have a piece of paper to show that you're a great teacher. You don't have a great teacher of L's. You don't have to speak Spanish to be a great teacher of L's. It definitely helps 1000%, but you don't have to be that language. It all comes back to relationships. It all comes back to making those connections with students. And if you can't make those connections, then you could speak any language and you could have all the certificates in the world, but if you can't connect with your students, then you've missed the boat entirely.
So we talk a lot about this in the episodes that we do, and I'm curious what your thought is on, and I think it goes part and parcel with unlocking limited potential and connecting to students. We talk about empathy and understanding quite often in here, and it seems like that drives your instruction from a teacher perspective, but also goes into the other areas. Can you speak to just the whole aspect of empathy and understanding and how that relates to that connection you're talking about? If it does, I don't want to do the loaded question kind of thing, but I feel like it does, but I'm just love to hear your thoughts on it.
Of course it does. I mean, and I think it's also, in addition to having those things, I think it's also being perceptive and being able to observe the surroundings and being able to observe what's going on around you, and just being able to ask the questions and just being interested. But yes, it does come with that. And trust me, empathy, I work with 10 and 11-year-old kids that have been sitting in front of a screen for the last year. So them having empathy for each other is a little bit complicated sometimes. So, you're trying to do that in a distance environment and they're not really there. And it's hard to have that empathy. It's something that I need to work on. I'm still working on, but it begins, if you can have that understanding of others, it's so important. It's so important. And I think that what I really try to do is I really try to get to know my students and get to know the educators that I work with. And as I work with these assignments that I assign for these courses that I teach, I try to create, assignments that allow them to tell their story. And I keep coming back to that. But I think like the more we kind of revisit our story and really think about why we are doing what we're doing, and the more ingrained that is, and if we can walk away with a purpose statement, like Jack Canfield always says, or if we can walk away with, have stuff around us and habits that work so that we can identify what makes us successful each and every day, then I think that that's really where we can push ourselves. And I think that that's what it's all about. And it takes empathy. It takes so much more. It takes patience. It takes vision. It takes, so much of an ability to be able to kind of really get to know people around you, and that compassion as well.
Yeah. And I love that you said the observation piece. And I think it goes along with being a lifelong learner, understanding, empathy, all that stuff. The observation piece, in my mind, drives a lot of what I do as well, to be objective in observing and to not do it with your own sort of reservations or constrictions in your thought process. To really truly observe, you need to look at things with sort of this open mind. And people talk about it a lot, but it's really hard to observe without prejudice, observe without judgment, right? So I think the observation part is really key, but you need to do that without saying, oh, what are they doing? They shouldn't be doing it that way. Or why did they not do it my way? Like, those are the kind of things that the observation process, it's great to be able to observe things, but you need to be able to do it in a really authentic, genuine, open-minded way, in my view.
I was just going to say that, the open-mindedness. I mean, yeah. I think I use that word 1,000 times throughout the book, for sure.
Rich, closing thoughts, and then we'll give Brandon the last statement. And we do hope to have you on. We're not sure if we schedule you for another one or not, Brandon, but like Rich said, we could talk about the L's and the teaching of those students, how that sort of transcends everything in education on our next show for sure. Rich, any closing thoughts? And then, like I said, I'll comment and let Brandon have the last word.
Real quick, and I'm a little bit long-winded, Brandon, so bear with me. Al usually cuts me off if I get too far afield. I feel, well, I'm very proud for you of what you have done and are yet going to do, and that's really cool. And that's clearly a product of a lot of reflection, as you said, self-reflection in that first stage foundation piece you mentioned in your book. I'm also thinking, and this may be unfair, so I'll just say it in advance, that you probably were, well, maybe you weren't. You were probably pretty lucky to land in a building where the culture of the building didn't impede you. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I did teach in New York City. I did do that for a year, and that was like the most important experience for me to have. So I think that definitely had a huge part of it. I taught in an inner city school. So I also, and then going there, it was, and also I've always enjoyed cultures. I studied abroad when I was in university, when I went to New Zealand. And I lived there for 6 months, so I always traveled. Both my family, my parents were teachers growing up. My parents were heavily involved in like AFS International Club students and exchange students. My parents were teachers for a total of 72 years. So I was used to having, people around that were from different cultures, just because they always welcomed it. We traveled a lot. We went to Europe a bunch.
That's cool. By culture, I meant the way the building operated, the way your leadership let you be, Brandon.
Oh, yeah. I'm so fortunate. 100%. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they even let me bring a dog to school. I even started a program through Yale University called Mudagrees, where I bring a dog to school for social emotional support. I literally adopted a dog and turned her into a therapy dog in like 8 months. So yeah, it's an amazing district. I am lucky.
Yeah, that's I'm not sure if it's the norm, but I hope that it will be if it isn't yet. So again, I praise you, and if there's anything we can do to help you promote this, even beyond this, you let us know, because we drink your Kool-Aid.
I appreciate that.
And I
I don't
love
say-
Brandon, I love that you refer to like even how you're referring to things, like your time in New York City. You worked there for a year, and I know New York City does not come without its challenges, but you cited as one of the most important experiences you had. And I think a lot of people will do that. They'll say, "Oh God, that was awful," or I never want to go back there again." The reverse of that is, hey, it was a challenge, but I really learned a lot, and it shaped who I am, right? As a person, as a leader, as an educator. So I appreciate that part of it. You are toxic and viral in nature. Your attitude is really, really intoxicating, I should say, and viral in nature. So I appreciate your mindset. It's something that's really encouraging, that educators out there have a positive outlook, positive mindset, and that sort of growth mindset, unlocking the unlimited potential. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you being on the show. So I'll give you the last word, and then, like I said, hopefully we'll have you on again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've enjoyed it, and it's this conversation could have went on forever, but I have a 4-month-old, and so I probably need to run soon. But I appreciate you guys giving me the time. But yeah, for sure. I mean, oh God, I mean, this book was 3 years in the making and writing, and it was after I defended my dissertation. I was like, I gotta write a book, and I took pieces of it, threw it in, and I just created a file that just kept going and going and going. But it goes back to what you were saying. It comes back to the idea of, looking at these challenges. Like I think inside of all of us are these stories. And it's not until we sit down and start really pinpointing our story and, actually identifying those moments that were moments of change in our lives, and those moments where, we don't give ourselves enough time to celebrate the struggles that we come through. And we all have struggles. And, sometimes a lot of people don't really all have, life coaches and personal therapists to work with. And, having the ability to, having a coach, changed my life, and it allowed me to get done what I needed to do. And it was just coaches in general. I mean, just being on the field as a player, always having someone, kind of mentoring me, and always being able to participate in those experiences. But everybody has inside of them those stories. And I think the more that we can work to identify the power within those stories, then you can start to see why you act a certain way, why you wake up in the morning a certain way, why when your feet hit the floor, you run right to your phone and it brings, complete stress right away. Like, I think, once we know ourselves, we really can start to identify what it is we need to serve others. And that's unlocking unlimited potential.
That's so well said. We appreciate you. We appreciate you coming on, and look forward to talking to you again, Dr. Brandon Beck. Thanks so much.
Thank you.